What up, y'all? How's everybody doing? Thanksgiving is approaching, and there was a lot of good football in Week 11. I thought that this probably had some of the best games all season, and it lived up to the hype. Like, the three primetime games were all great matchups, and they lived up to it. Seattle, Arizona, Thursday night, Kansas City, Raiders, Sunday night, and Rams, Bucks, Monday night. All close finishes, and there were a bunch of other good games too. Packers, Colts was considered the game of the week on Sunday, and that was definitely one of the best games I've seen all season, not to mention some other ones. So let's get right into it. NFC East. Obviously, we have to start there. The state of division, further more ridiculous as each week goes on. All four teams separated by a half game. You have the Eagles, who are playing the worst of the four teams at 3-6-1, and then a three-way tie for second at 3-7, the Giants, the Cowboys, and Washington. So, first off with the Giants, there was a lot of news, obviously, the week previous, where they fired their offensive line coach, Mark Colombo, and hired Dave DeGuglielmo, who was once in the Giants organization years ago and has a lot of ties to Joe Judge, dating back to his days with the Patriots. He's bounced around a bit in recent years. He was with the Dolphins last season. He's been with the Colts recently. And he's well respected around the league. Definitely a no-nonsense type of guy. It seemed like Colombo was more of a player's coach. And it seemed like he defended a lot of his guys. Joe Judge it's all business. I mean, I think he knows when to push the right buttons. We've seen that. As serious as he is, we've also seen other moments where he can be lighthearted. But I rather Judge be like that. I think the previous two regimes, with Ben McAdoo and Pat Shurmur, they didn't have any backbone, and there was no control. Players just kind of did they just did whatever they wanted to. And I think it's great that he's instituted a program in which these guys are playing as hard as they can each week, and they're playing for each other. So I'm going to defend Judge here, and it's hard not to, as a Giant fan and seeing the way they're playing. And look, I'm sure Mark Colombo wasn't thrilled knowing that he was going to have, an offensive line guru looking over him. The plan wasn't to fire Colombo, but Colombo didn't take it well. And, apparently there was, a lot of tension between Judge and Colombo, and it kind of all came to a head, and it resulted in Colombo getting fired. There were reports that there was some physical altercation. I don't believe that. I mean, a lot of people shot that down, and I tend to not think that was true, but I guess this was something that was boiling over for a while, and we'll see what it results in. It's a perfect time to do it with the bye week. And I think that DeGuglielmo is one that believes in having different players like Judge does, kind of the Patriot way, where you're rotating in different guys into the offensive line. Whereas the old school way, the traditional way, I think is more where Colombo believes, and that's just having all five guys the whole game. I think you see most teams do that. And it's worked for the Giants in recent weeks where, like I've said, you're mixing and matching with Lemieux and Peart and Hernandez and whatever it may be. It keeps guys fresh, and it gives these young kids experience that maybe they wouldn't have normally had. So now the Giants are in a situation where going into this week, the Bengal matchup was supposed to be probably one of, if not their most winnable game left. And it became a lot more winnable because unfortunately Joe Burrow is out for the season. An ugly injury versus Washington. Another disgusting injury on that field. Alex Smith a few years ago. Kyle Allen earlier in the year. or actually really a few weeks ago, and now Joe Burrow. So, hate to see it for the kid. He looked really good in his rookie season. It's a question as to whether he'll be back for week 1 of next year. It's going to be a long recovery, and I wish him well, and, you hate to see it. But, in terms of what it means moving forward, Washington was able to win as a result of that. It was a close game, but once Burrow was out, Ryan Finley, the 4th-round pick in 2019 out of NC State, did not look ready. Obviously, he'll have a week to prepare now, so you should see improvement, but there's no excuse for the Giants this week. They have to win. They have to. With the state of the division, they're playing well, and now you have no Joe Burrow, no Joe Mixon. It's a game the Giants have to win. There is no excuse to lose this game. So we'll see. Washington picks up a big victory. Philly loses again to Cleveland. Carson Wentz looks like a mess. I'm telling you, this could, if he plays poorly, home against Seattle on Monday night this week, could be it for him. They may go to Hurts. I mean, they drafted him in the 2nd round, so we'll see. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm not like the biggest Wentz fan, but what I've seen, it's getting to the point where he is deserving of a benching. He's been that bad. And they are getting healthier too, so he has less excuse. And I understand that this Cleveland, terrible weather. I mean, it seems like every Cleveland game lately has been just horrendous. Winds, rain, whatever you could think of. So, even though Philly is atop the division, they're not looking good, and that schedule is really tough. Their next 4 games are Seattle, Green Bay, New Orleans, and Arizona. It's going to be tough to win any of them, to be honest. And then let's go to Dallas. And that's where, as a Giant fan, even though they had been struggling, this was a really big win for them. And it's kind of the team that, not to discount Washington, not to discount Philly, but Dallas is now the team that I kind of have my eye on. Considering the easy schedule they have remaining, knowing that Dalton, while he's no Dak Prescott, he's not a bad quarterback. Probably one of the best backups in the league. And they have a lot of pieces still healthy on the offense. Now, look, the defense is still not good at all. That will probably cost them at the end of the day. But it's hard not to think that Week 17 Cowboy-Giant game, I could just see it now. And I hope I would sign up for that, right? If that's a winning-in game, flex to Sunday night. We've seen this before. I understand that, it might be the Giants at 5-10 and the Cowboys at 6-9, but I can tell you something. That game will still get ratings. It still is Giants-Cowboys. So sign me up for that right now. But I'll say this. I don't know. The Cowboys, they're going to be a threat. And this Thanksgiving game, Washington-Dallas, is huge. Huge for the division. And for so many reasons, if you're a Giant fan, you are rooting for Washington to beat Dallas. For a million reasons. You definitely want Washington to win this game. And it should be a good game. It should be. Washington has played very competitive the whole season. Dallas, when they lose, a lot of the time they've gotten blown out. And when they've won, let's think about the games they've won. Atlanta, the crazy comeback with the onside kick, a game they should have never won. The Giant game, don't even get me started on that. That was a ridiculous last-second type win. And then this past week against Minnesota, which is a bit of a back and forth, but they were, a 4th down away from losing that game. They did what they needed to do. Bad job by the Vikings. Really bad job by them. I was singing their praises. They were 4-5. They won 3 in a row, and they had home games against Dallas, Carolina, and Jacksonville upcoming. They blew it. I think you can forget about the Vikings at this point. So, yeah, I have to say, the Cowboys, I think that if I had to make my prediction again, I'm a bit of a pessimistic fan at heart. And I think that the Giants have been playing the best football in the division, but I gotta say, I think that Dallas might win this division. But if it does come down to that last game, I'll take my chances. I just hope it gets to that point. And if the Giants, based on the math and the tiebreakers, if the Giants are just 1 game back of Dallas, assuming that Washington and Philly are behind them, which is a big assumption, right? I mean, these teams are so close. If that's the case, then the Giants will still be mathematically alive and it will be a winning game. They just have to be a game behind. So, we'll see. So, very excited as a fan of one of the teams in the division. With 6 weeks to go, this could go anywhere. And it's going to be fun, and it's all going to start on Thanksgiving with Washington versus the Cowboys. Around the league, let's start with the NFC West. Seattle, Arizona, this was a very big game. These teams had played a few weeks previous, and Arizona basically was handed a win by Seattle. The way I saw that game, Seattle should have absolutely won, and Arizona kind of took it from them. Or I kind of think that Seattle just gave it to them. Russell Wilson with a bad interception in overtime, and just they blew a 10-point lead late. Just a bad job by them, but they did what they had to do this time. Kyler looked banged up. That Murray-Hopkins magic that we saw the week previous against Buffalo didn't exist in this game. Russell Wilson was efficient, but the Seattle defense did a pretty good job. And this was a really big win for Seattle when you consider everything. And now, not only do you have, the Seahawks Cardinal situation, but watch out for the Rams. The Rams with a big Monday night win at the Bucs. And the Rams, a few weeks ago, beat the Seahawks. So it's a 3-team race, but right now you kind of have to give the leg up to either Seattle or the Rams. And they play again, of course, in Seattle, so that'll go a long way. And I believe the Rams and Cardinals haven't even played yet this season. So there's so much to be determined in that division. And the Rams, this was a great performance tonight by Sean McVay. Although I guess, to be fair, the one thing where I felt he messed up was he got very conservative in a tie game with under 3 minutes. The Bucs started calling timeouts. He just kind of gave up and just settled for the field goal. It didn't come back to bite. And they've been playing a very run-heavy style all year. We're used to seeing the Sean McVay, Jared Goff Rams being very pass-heavy. And this year it's been different. But tonight, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, they were being thrown to all night long. And the Bucs had no answers. None. And I think that speaks to some ineptitude on the Bucs' part. But also the Rams, they've been a strange team. They really dominated on a weak NFC East. That's 4 of their wins right there. But that Seahawks win was impressive, and this win tonight was impressive. So the Rams are very much in that position to maybe win the division. I tend to think that Seattle, when it's all said and done, especially with the game in Seattle, I think they'll be the ones on top. But let's not rule the Rams out just yet, by any means. So that leads me in to the NFC South. Tom Brady did not look good at all. He looked terrible. Let's be honest. Let's call it as we see it. He looked like shit. And he's looked like shit against tough competition. And I think if you're a Buck fan and a Brady fan, there has to be a little bit of concern. I know when, the games get really big, usually you'll see the best out of Tom Brady. So nothing would shock me, but the Saints are looking like they are going to win that division. Because of the fact that they beat the Bucs twice, you're looking at a team that's 8-2 in the Saints and 7-4 in the Bucs with the tiebreaker. Saints are looking very good. Saints are looking very good to maybe even finish number 1 overall in the conference. The only team that maybe could stop that is the Packers. We'll get to them. But the Bucs have all these weapons, but yet it doesn't seem to matter. Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski. Sometimes Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette do well. A lot of the times they don't. And I know that they had some offensive line injuries. And I thought this defense was one of the better defenses. I said that. And I still think that they're very good. But tonight, they were not. They weren't. They got some turnovers on Jared Goff. But other than that, when the Rams needed to move the ball at the end of the first half, after the Bucs tied it up, they did exactly that. Big chunk plays to Woods and Kupp in particular. And Jared Goff It was a good game for him. Because I think for a while, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, I don't know who's better. Are either of them good? Well, good on Jared Goff. Because he did what he had to tonight to get the win and some. So the Saints got a win against the Falcons. And very easily, too. I thought the Falcons were going to give more of a test. 8 sacks for the Saints. Taysom Hill did pretty good. And Jameis Winston saw the bench the whole game. It remains to be seen if that continues. I wonder if the Saints somehow fell behind big in a game, if they would go to Jameis. But Taysom Hill and Michael Thomas looked great. They did. I mean, Michael Thomas hadn't done a whole lot this year due to injury and just kind of ineffectiveness, but he was peppering Thomas all game long. And Kamara seems a bit banged up with the foot injury, and his usage might go down for sure. But I guess maybe it's because of his health as well. But the Saints are on a 7-game winning streak, and they're going to be tough to beat. This defense is very underrated that New Orleans has. So they could be in a wide open NFC. I think it is with all those good West teams, the Packers are a threat. So it's wide open, but the Saints are looking very strong. Very strong. And so, the Panthers rounding out the NFC South with a good performance against the kind of lifeless, banged-up Detroit team. And P.J. Walker comes in, does what he has to. Good defensive performance by Carolina. Not much to speak of there. Matt Rule seems to be turning things around in Carolina. They've had injuries, and they continue to play pretty competitively. As far as the NFC North, Detroit, they were kind of in it a little bit, but I think that loss and the way they looked was just awful. So, they have a game coming up on Thanksgiving against Houston. Not really going to expect a whole lot from the Lions. The Bears were on bye, which is just good. That team is tough to watch. I have to tell you, they're one of the worst 5-5 teams I've ever seen. It's not a terrible defense, don't get me wrong, but that offense is just putrid. And Minnesota blew a golden opportunity. So this is Green Bay's division. And even with that being said, they lost. So the NFC North had a really bad weekend. And Green Bay had it. They were up by 2 touchdowns against the Colts. And they couldn't get it done. They could not get it done. They had a huge turnover in overtime, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. It was looking like, all right, Packers get the ball first, Aaron Rodgers, at the very least, they'll get a field goal. Wasn't meant to be. So the Packers have shown some cracks here and there. I think it's a good team. Davante Adams is awesome. Like this week when they play the Bears, I think that might be a blowout. I really do. Sunday Night Football at Lambeau, I think the Packers will get right back at it and be just fine. So it's a game they'd like to have back, but at the same time, you really only cost yourself, which is big, potentially the 1 seed. And because they beat New Orleans, there's still a shot there. And what I would imagine to be a fairly weak schedule coming for Green Bay, considering the NFC North just isn't very good besides them. So they, in some ways, will still control their own destiny as far as I'm concerned. The Colts, let's get into the AFC South, which is extremely interesting. The Colts beat the Packers. Phillip Rivers, who was a bit banged up, did what he had to do, and they seem to be finding a flow. And the defense, it wasn't one of their stronger performances, but it's against the Packers, so you have to expect that they're going to regress just a bit. And it's a pretty complete team, but Colts-Titans is going to be a huge, huge game this weekend, very likely for the division. And it's bigger for the Titans because the Colts just won. So if the Colts win, they're up by a game and they have the tiebreaker. It puts them in a really good position. So it's in Indy. And I'm very excited to see what happens because they just played a week ago on Thursday night. And Tennessee had a huge win again at Baltimore. Just like the playoffs. Just like last year in the AFC divisional round. where they basically had Lamar Jackson not looking too great, which is something that we've seen a lot this season. And Derrick Henry does what Derrick Henry does. It seems like Tennessee plays an awful lot of overtime games, and when they do, Henry is a huge part of the success in those overtimes. I remember a game earlier this year against the Texans where he just put the team on his back. So it's a fun team to watch at times, the Titans. And the good thing for them is even the loser of that game still has a very decent chance of making the playoffs. I wasn't sure about that, but with those wins this week, Colts against the Packers, Titans against the Ravens, the winner's in really awesome shape, and the loser still has a very good chance. So the AFC South had a somewhat surprisingly good weekend in matchups that you may not have necessarily expected them to win. They got the huge W's. Ryan Tannehill looked better. A.J. Brown with a crazy touchdown where he just bowled his way in and got pushed in by his own guy. So I was impressed by what I saw there. Houston beats New England, and that kind of puts New England in a tough situation at this point. It's going to be, I know Belichick and everything, but it's not going to be easy. They kind of had to have that game. And Houston, as bad as the record is, it's a decent team. You still have Deshaun Watson. I know the defense isn't very good, but when you have him as quarterback, who could be argued as one of the top 5 in the game, they'll win their fair share of games. It's just how it is. And the Jaguars again get killed. They and the Jets, and we'll get into the Jets, those are the teams that are vying for the number 1 pick. That's just how it is. There's no one else. They're going to be 1-2. It's just a matter of who gets 1, who gets 2. And they got killed by Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh now, jumping into the AFC North, Pittsburgh basically is home free in the division. Even if they lost to the Ravens on Thanksgiving, they are fine. I know the Browns are 7-3, but Pittsburgh, it's for them, it's a matter of who gets first, them or Kansas City in the AFC, and whether Pittsburgh stays undefeated. This is not a 16-0 team, but the schedule isn't that tough. I know they still play the Bills, they still play the Colts. They'll probably lose somewhere. Hey, it may even be Thursday night against the Ravens. But they are going to end up with a very good record. There's no doubt. And them going 16-0, it's not something you think about now, but if they win a few more games, we'll be watching very closely each game to see what they do. And Roethlisberger looks great. The passing attack is fantastic. And their defense is one of the best in the league. So you have a very complete team on your hands in Pittsburgh. Baltimore's in trouble. Baltimore, for them, it was like a foregone conclusion to make the playoffs. Now, we don't even know. I think that they'll kind of find their groove, and I think that they'll get in, because I know that their schedule does lighten up a bit. But if Lamar Jackson's going to play the way he has, I don't know. I really don't. And the defense has kind of slipped up in big spots where they couldn't get that big stop to help them win some of these games. So I'll be, watching the Ravens very closely. And that's why this Ravens-Steelers game is going to be very interesting. Because you have this undefeated Steelers team against a struggling Raven team. And can the Ravens turn this whole thing around? It's a really big game for Baltimore. This is a very pivotal spot for them. And, we already spoke about Cleveland. Winning against Philly, it was ugly. And that's just kind of the way they do it. It's funny. They have a negative 20-something point differential, and they're 7-3. You just never see that. They basically got blown out in their 3 losses, and they've won a lot of close games. Now they play Jacksonville this week, so one would think that their record will improve even further. And their schedule is pretty easy down the stretch. Cleveland, barring something crazy, they should definitely make the playoffs. And, in fact, with room to spare. So we might see the Browns in the playoffs for the first time in about 18 years. The last time they made it was 2002. So that would break a very long drought. And so now moving to the AFC East, you have the New York Jets against the Chargers. And what can you say about the Jets? The offense seems to be improving for what it's worth. It was too little too late for them, but they're just so undisciplined. Their defense is awful. They take terrible penalties. Greg Williams, Mr. Bounty fucking gate, when he's kind of leading the charge, who knows what's going to go on. Then obviously Adam Gase, nothing else needs to be said about him. So, will the Jets win this season? Very questionable. But this week they play Miami. And I have to say, Tua Tagovailoa does not look so good at all. He got benched. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the better quarterback right now. He is. Fitzpatrick is very turnover prone. That is true. But it's one of those things, again, kind of like with the Saints I was saying, where if you're losing, like they were against the Broncos this week, you want Fitz in there. Tua is not going to, if they're down by 10 and there's 10 minutes left, Tua is not going to do anything. He's just not. I haven't seen it. I think Fitzpatrick adds just more to the offense, but it sounds like they're going back to Tua this week. So the Dolphins are in a questionable position as far as their playoff standing. I think they'll beat the Jets. I do. Don't get me wrong. But this could be, we saw what the Jets did against the Patriots, a home divisional game. I think this is going to be a close game. I really do. And maybe that's not all that much of a surprise, but Darnold, we'll see what his status is this week. But, the Jets continue to lose. I'm not trying to, say that this team's all of a sudden turned a corner. But I do think that people are kind of making it seem like this should be like a blowout Dolphin win. I'm not really seeing that. Based on the things I've seen lately, the Jets aren't getting killed as much as they were. And I just think that Tua, they're looking like a bland offense. The Jets might have a lot of trouble scoring. So I'll be curious when we circle back next week to see, and I'll eat crow. If the Dolphins just absolutely destroy them, I'll admit I was totally wrong. But I think that might be a closer game than people think. And with the Bills on bye, that was big for them to have the Dolphins lose. So that division is not over by any means. We've seen the Bills slip up in the past, obviously. Their history shows it. But now they have a game home against the Chargers, and that won't be easy. But we'll see. And then in the AFC West. So what a game. Chiefs and Raiders. That was a really, really good game. Sunday Night Football. The Raiders had beaten the Chiefs in Week 5, and they almost did it again. And the quarterback play on both sides was amazing. Derek Carr, that was one of the best games I've ever seen him play. He's had a very good season. He throws an interception at the end, but that was nothing. The game was basically over at that point. He was not the reason they lost. He gave them every chance to win. But Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. That's just what it comes down to. And you give him all that time, he's going to, slice you up. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, it's a machine. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's so much. He is so good. It's scary. And the Raiders did everything that they could. Especially considering the fact that Andy Reid is usually great off the bye. And they had lost to the Raiders previously. So I kind of felt like there was a chance the Chiefs might just rout them, and it didn't happen that way at all. Vegas, John Gruden's doing a good job with the Raiders. So they're one of those bubble teams, but I have to say, I like what I've seen from them. And usually with the Raiders, I don't really believe in what they're going to do. Sometimes they have a good record and it kind of all falls apart. They might keep it going. They definitely might keep it going. So if they had won, that division would have been interesting, but the Chiefs are now in a very good spot. Steelers and Chiefs. I want to see that in the AFC Championship. And I think that we will. There's so much to go. A lot can happen. Who even knows if we'll have playoff football? I think we will. It's weird. A lot of these positive tests somehow miraculously come right after the game. There's like a slew of positive tests on Mondays when teams have byes. It's very curious. It's very interesting. But kind of all joking aside, it would be fun to see the Steelers versus the Chiefs. The Steelers notoriously have had the Chiefs number. Now, obviously, you throw Mahomes into the fold and it's completely different. But that would be a really, really good championship game. And I think we'll see it. It's a question of whether it'll be at Arrowhead or Heinz Field. So, Thanksgiving is going to be different this year. But we still get our, 3 football games. For me as a Giant fan, I can't wait for Washington, Dallas. I know it's a battle between 2, 3, and 7 teams, but you kind of just have to throw the records out the window. And it's going to be fun. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, that's always good. So hopefully everyone enjoys their turkey, their stuffing, whatever their other Thanksgiving favorites are. And I'll talk to y'all next week.